All right, so welcome back. And on this one, we will expand a little bit more about that JSX thing. So remember, when we write HTML, it's not HTML, it's going to be called JSX. And I'm telling you this several times so you can, remember that the keyword is JSX. And whenever you have to find some information about on the web, you can refer this as JSX and not HTML. All right. So remember that the JSX, it's something that looks like HTML, but it's just not. This is JavaScript. So behind the scenes, the React application, because we are importing React from React, and React is already on top of this, it knows that we are just trying to return some some HTML. So this React is working on this one. So when we return this component, it's doing something behind the scenes. So I'm going to go and delete this. So what it's doing, it's, of course, we still need to return something. What it's doing, it's invoking or calling a method called createElement, just like this. So the createElement, what we'll do, it will just read the content or the HTML lookalike that we are writing, and it will just create create a code in something that React can understand and then, of course, show on the screen. So for example, I'm going to go and use this method, right, that we get inside React. So I'm going to say, all right, I want an H1 tag. So I'm going to say H1. So if I go right here and reload the application, of course, we don't get anything. But if I go to elements, since our component is just returning an H1 tag, that's what we get. React knows that we want to create an H1, so it's going to go and do it for us. So this is what's happening behind the scenes. Now, of course, we might have like a really complicated HTML kind of a layout. So, of course, this could be much, much bigger. Let's say that on this H1, we want to add a class name, right? So, all right, so I'm going to go right here and we're going to do class name right now, class name, and this one, it's going to be equal to title. Right, so I'm going to go right here and going to reload the application, and notice that on the body of the on H1, we get the class of title. So again, the createElement, it's doing all this work, right, for us behind the scenes, right? That's the idea. So then if, again, let's say that I want to add something inside the H1. So I'm going to go right here, and the third one is going to be, all right, it's going to say hello world or something like that. So if I reload the application, we are back to the same example we had from before, pretty much the same, right? So this is what happens behind the scenes. So let's say that I want to create an element inside. So all of these methods are just chainable. So right here, I'm gonna maybe, maybe delete this one. And I'm gonna say, all right, I'm gonna go comma, and the content is gonna be another React create element. So I'm gonna go right here, copy the createElement, which is the same method. And of course, this one will do pretty much the same thing. Open and close, and on this one, I'm going to create a div, right? So we are creating an H1 with a class of title, and then inside, we will add a div. So if I reload the application, of course, we are going to lose that one, but we get the H1, and then we get the div. So again, all of this is doing it for us behind the scenes. Now, of course, how, crappy would be for us to write HTML content this way. It just sucks. It just sucks. And of course, we don't have to, because all of this is going to be handled by the React project for us. So we can easily do what we were doing before. Let me just go back to the previous code, and we don't have to type all that nonsense. And we are going to still get the same result, right? So super cool. Now on JSX, remember I told you this is not HTML. So if you start doing some code that React just doesn't like it, the whole application will crash. So right now we are just creating a component, which is a function that returns some JSX code. All right. So what we could do as well, if you want, you can not return anything right here. And instead of using curly braces, you just can use the opening and closing of parentheses. And this one, by default, it will return whatever you have right here. And all of this is just JavaScript. It's not React. So if I reload the application, we get the same result. Now, what you cannot do in the JSX world is to return different statements instead of one. I know it just sounds weird, makes no sense. All right, so I'm going to go and delete the div. So right now we are just returning an H1 tag, right? So that's going to work. So if I reload the application, that works. And it's because we are returning a single statement. If I return 2 statements, notice that we go into error state. And of course, the whole application will just not work. So you always need to return from a component a single statement. So what happens if I want to do 2 H1s, or maybe an H1 and an H2 right here? So you always need to wrap it on a single component and a single element. Not component, sorry, element. So a single div that has as a child whatever you want to do. But you always need to return a single child. Right, super simple. Now, this is like the golden rule. Now, of course, what happens if you want to do a class, right? Okay, I'm gonna go right here and I'm gonna say, all right, so I want to add a class, and the class for this one is gonna be, I don't know, hey. So I'm gonna go right here and this is gonna work. Of course, this is not gonna break the application, but notice that we get an error. And by default, it's gonna say invalid DOM property class. And we are back to the same thing. Remember, this is not HTML, it's JSX. So class is a reserved keyword and we cannot use it. So in the JSX world, whenever we want to add a class, we need to use the keyword class name, right? And I know this is going to be weird for you. And it happened to me when I was working with learning React. And whenever I wanted to add a class, by default, I go and do class. But you need to get used to the class name. So now if I reload the application, we don't get any errors. And at the end of the day, that class is going to be translated, class name is going to be translated to class, right? So always, when you want to do class name on the JSX. Now, another thing that is happening right now is that I'm returning an H1 and an H2, but maybe I just don't need this div. But I know that if I remove this one, we are returning 2 statements. So from after React 16.7 or .8 or something like that, we got fragments. So fragments, I'm going to go and do it like this. I'm going to say React dot, and I'm going to say fragment. And then I'm going to go right here at the bottom and say React, and then pretty much the same thing. Now, this is an opening and closing of a tag, so I'm going to need to close it right there. So notice that the code right now is not complaying anymore. And if I reload the application, we get the same result. Now, what is the difference? Of course, we just fixing that error right here, but notice right here that we are not creating an additional div. That's the whole point of the React fragment, that we can avoid that error of returning different statements, but we are not creating additional elements. Whenever we do a div, of course, that div will be part of the HTML. Maybe we don't want it. Now, of course, just writing React fragments every time that we want to do this, it really sucks. So we get a shorthand. We can do something like this, and this is still going to work. So this is going to be translated into no div at all. All right, cool. All right, so, on each section, we just know a little bit more. So remember, always return 1 single statement from here, and always remember to use class names instead of classes. Okay, so let's go to the next one.